Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. Teslin Figaro is with us this morning.
I can't wait to see you attempt this name.
And we got a special guest in the building, Vivek Ramaswamy. Did I say it right?
That's actually pretty good. It's better than most
Pretty
hosts.
good.
Yeah, it's like Ramaswamy, like CD-ROM, but yeah.
Well, I said Ramaswamy.
Yeah, you got it. though.
Ramaswamy.
It's
Well, good morning.
good to see you guys.
How you
Good to see
feeling?
you too.
Feeling good, guys.
You're running for president.
I am.
Running for president. Yeah, you're actually polling third behind Trump and DeSantis right now. The latest Fox poll shows you
A
polling-
distant third.
A distant third.
Distant third, yes.
I was about to say the third from second is huge, but what do you think you need to do to close that gap?
I mean, most people in this country do not know who I am. So against that backdrop, the fact that I'm ahead of a vice president and a bunch of U.S. senators and a former U.S. ambassador and governors is honestly ahead of where I expected to be right now. Our goal was to be in third by the end of the year. And then you have the Iowa caucus, and then you have the New Hampshire primary. And the fact that you go those early states in order makes it possible for an outsider like me to actually do this because we spend a lot of time getting to know people in those states. And so it's going to be a steady process. The debates, I think, are pretty key. They start in August. I'm qualified for the debate stage already. I tend to like settings where we're debating. So hopefully that goes well. And we'll see where this takes us.
Does anybody who's not a white male really stand a chance of being a Republican? Not me.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that there is
They
this.
don't seem like they're open to that kind of diversity.
I'll be honest with you. I travel the country. I have not really experienced meaningful racism from grassroots conservative audiences for the last, several years that I've been, since I stepped down from my business career. That was a different world I was in. But for my book tours and everything else, and then now for this campaign, traveling the country, it's funny. That's the impression that you get from the media. Meeting people from Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, New Hampshire, I don't see that at all. In fact, I just see a hunger for substance, ideas, what's actually going to make the country better. I actually am very encouraged by that. And I think that more people should. I used to live here in New York as well. And I'm not saying this about you guys, but I remember for me, you get trapped in a bubble. When we get out of that bubble.
I'm going to South Carolina.
Well, perfect. Well,
Yeah,
South
so
Carolina. When did you grow up there?
My whole life. I didn't move to New York till 2006. So I understand exactly
2006.
what you're saying.
But I actually think a lot of what I'm saying is specific to. I think the country is in a different place today, even than it was in the 90s and 2000s. I grew up in Southwest Ohio in the 1990s. Very different environment than it is today. But anyway, I mean it as a good note. I don't think that there's some sort of racist obstacle in the mind of Republican primary voters. Actually, if you look at the Republican field, even some of those other people on that poll you were mentioning, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley,
yeah.
Go down the list. There's even others as well. Larry Elder, black man's running. I think we'll see who ends up succeeding. But whoever it is, I don't think it's going to be a racial bias that holds me back.
Why should people vote for you?
Yeah, so I'm somebody who is coming in as an outsider to the system. And I think in the White House, when it comes to the White House, if we really want to reform a lot of the corruption in government, it is going to take an outsider to get that job done. I'm 37. I'm the first millennial ever to run for president as a Republican. And I think I have a view on our generation of what's going on in the country, where we are all so hungry for a cause, for purpose and meaning and identity. But the things that used to give us that sense of purpose, faith, patriotism, family, hard work, these things are out. And that's why we latch on to fill in the blank. In conservative circles, a lot of us will point to wokeism, gender ideology, the climate cult, COVIDism. But you could fill in the blank with depression, anxiety, drug use, suicide. I think these are symptoms of a deeper hunger for purpose and meaning in our country. And so in some ways, I'm running as a member of my generation to say that we can fill that void with the things that actually give us real purpose. Revive family in America. That's actually a big part of my platform. It's what allowed me to achieve success. My parents gave me a great family foundation. I didn't grow up in money. We're trying to give that to my two kids as well. I want that to be enjoyed by Americans across the country. Belief in the country, national pride. Less than 16% of Gen Z even says they're proud to be an American. I'm not making this one up. This is about a month ago. There was a good survey. 60% of young Americans said that they would sooner give up their right to vote than to give up access to TikTok or other social media. That's a problem. So I think we have a crisis of national pride.
Whose fault is that, though? That's America's fault. That's the system's fault for constantly failing the people.
Well, I see it. I see it less about. We can allocate the blame. We can talk about allocating the blame. I think there's blame to go around. I think it's up to all of us to take a long, hard look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what is that vacuum in our heart? It's an old saying that goes, if there's a hole the size of God in your heart and God does not fill it, something else will instead. I think the same applies for belief in a nation as well. So I think what's going on is we're human beings. What makes us different from animals is that we can believe. We need to believe in something bigger than ourselves. And when we lose God and family and country, we start believing in new false gods instead. That's what's going on in the country. And so I don't know that it's so much a question of fault, but more a question of how do we actually revive our sense of self-confidence and pride.
It's definitely a question of fault. I can absolutely blame white supremacy, 100%.
Really?
Yeah.
See, say more, and then I'll respond to that.
I mean, just look at the history of the country. Like, it's just really just that simple for me. The country has never fulfilled its promises of freedom, liberty, and justice for all. It's always been freedom, liberty, and justice for some. And usually that some is white people.
So here's what I would say in response to that. That is obviously true that the nation has fallen short of our promise since our founding. But walk through some obvious facts about America. We're not founded on an ethnicity or a monarch or a food or even a religion. We're founded on a set of ideals that brought a group of people together in 1776, and we live by those ideals. At least we aspire to those ideals today. A nation that aspires to ideals that's not made up of gods, but made up of human beings, will always fall short of those ideals. So I think our worst hypocrisies as a country, and we have many of them, our worst hypocrisies are our best evidence that we have ideals at all. You take a look at other countries. Nobody ever calls the Chinese Communist Party a hypocrite, or China a hypocrite, or Iran a hypocrite. Why is that? Because to be a hypocrite, you at least had to have ideals in the first place.
But a lot of
and so we're imperfect, but we are about the pursuit of a more perfect union, the pursuit of happiness. America's about the pursuit. And so I think that trashing ourselves, I think we are, actually.
The reason I say that is because, we never were included in those ideals originally.
Originally. Yeah. But never and not originally are two different things. Originally, that's true. Over 250 years of progress, if you had somebody who was in 1870 looking at the world we live in today, if you had somebody in 1960 who was looking at the world we live in today as it relates to race in America, we would be darn close to what they would have thought of as the promised land. So I think we have to recognize that America is about that pursuit. We're a lot further along than we were 250 years ago. And here's the other thing, too. We got to set our expectations. We will always fall short of our ideals. By definition, if there are human beings and not gods living in a nation that aspires to ideals, we are fallen. Man is fallen. That's what makes us who we are. But what also makes us different from animals is that we have ideals. So America's founded on our humanity, that we can believe and aspire to something that we will still fall short of. That's what makes this country beautiful. And that's why that's why I'm in this. You ask me, why am I in this? I care about reviving pride in that nation, because if we get into the habit of just bashing that country, what are we bashing? We're bashing the last best hope that man has for aspiring to those ideals. Tell me who else has done better. I'll wait.
I don't think I'm bashing the country. I think I'm bashing the system.
Okay.
I want to change. I want to change the system.
Well, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I'm with you on changing the system. It's what brings me into this.
And what's your thoughts on some of the people that you're running against, Donald Trump and DeSantis? What are your thoughts on them and their leadership and what they've done for the country so far?
I think everybody's made their respective contributions. I respect some things about what each of them have done. I think the Republican Party, I tell this to conservative audiences all the time, obsesses over the question of the who. Ronna McDaniel, she was the chair of the Republican Party versus somebody else, or Kevin McCarthy or somebody else, or Donald Trump or somebody else. This is a superficial discussion versus actually just taking a step back, and the Republican Party does not do this enough. What do we stand for, and why do we stand for it? Actually, a lot of my criticisms are also directed at the fact that we define ourselves, when I say we, I'm running as a Republican, but as a party in opposition to something. All right, that's what Joe Biden did. That's what the radical left does. And race, gender, sexuality, climate. I'm opposed to a lot of these ideologies of identity, but the right falls into the trap of just saying we're not those things, and then we'll fight about which biographies win. Oh, I'm actually a bigger and more accomplished person than you, and I'm going to sling mud at you, versus asking the question of, what do we actually stand for? For me, it's about individual, family, nation, God. You can agree or disagree, but at least that's a vision that's different from a vision of identity grounded on race and gender and sexuality and climate. And so that's a long way of saying, I guess, what I see as deficient in the field, and the entire Republican field, including candidates you mentioned, is they're all running from something. And I'm in this race because I want us to run to something.
What is that something?
A vision of what it means to be American. Okay? Revive the ideals of 1776. Revive the truth, meritocracy, excellence, freedom of speech, rule of law. A radical idea. This is not a Democrat or Republican idea, that the people we elect to run the government ought to at least be the ones who actually run the government. That's not the case today. You want to talk about fixing the system. You want to talk about one of the myths where we fall short of our ideals. We're taught in school that we have 3 branches of government. They're irrelevant compared to who actually runs the government. It's a 4th branch of government of 3-letter agencies in Washington, D.C. That is a formula for corruption. Corruption we get. That's a system we need to break down.
Who's those 3?
I mean, you could go down the list. SEC, FDA, EPA, TSA. The tens of thousands of government bureaucrats working in Washington, D.C., they're the ones who actually make the laws. It's not Congress. And that's a formula. And those people aren't elected. Nobody elected them. They're protected by these what are called civil service protections, which means even the president, technically, under many people's beliefs, can't fire them. That's the permanent state, what many in the right will call the deep state. I think that's a problem. I think that falls short of our ideals. I think the same FBI that threatened Martin Luther King with suicide on the back of incorrectly collected tapes is now committing, I would say, hypocrisy and corrupt actions against people of a different political persuasion that the FBI doesn't like today. I just think it's a formula for corruption when you have unelected bureaucrats that are actually setting policy. But that's a detail compared to my point, which is we need to revive the ideals that the nation was actually founded on and do a better job of aspiring to them.
Now we have Teslin Figueroa. I'm sure Teslin has some questions. Tez, you good?
Yes, I do. So I've heard a lot of, what you think and your vision, and I'm a very practical person, and I want to kind of, opposed to talking about your opponents, let's talk about you for a moment, and let's actually talk about your policy. Explain to me your position on this civic duty voting.
Sure. So my position is, I think that every kid who graduates from high school should know the minimums about the country that we require an immigrant to know about the country in order to become a citizen. So there's a test. My mom had to pass it. Every immigrant has to pass it to this country that asks you some basic questions. What are the 3 branches of government? What branch of government does the U.S. president lead? Some basic questions about what is the Bill of Rights. It's like a multiple choice exam, or some of them you write in. I think that if we're going to ask immigrants to pass that test, as we should, I think every 18-year-old who graduates from high school should have to pass that as well, because young people, it goes back to that issue of pride. You don't value a country that you don't know something about. You don't value something you inherit. You value something you have a stake in creating, in building, or knowing something about. So how do we think big about this? Well, young people, as I told you, most of them, very few of them vote as it stands today. Super small numbers. And apparently 60% of them say they would rather give up their right to vote than give up TikTok. Well, I say, all right, let's take that to the next level. How about we do something that raises the voting age from 18 to 25, but you still get to vote at 18 if you just pass that same civics test that an immigrant has to pass in order to vote. And tests aren't for everybody, so be it. Then you at least serve in the military or a first responder role for 6 months. That's my civic duty voting proposal. And the reason is, I'll actually make a prediction. I think youth voting in this country will skyrocket. From a very low level right now, it will skyrocket because you value something you actually have to earn. And I think that this is not a left-wing or right-wing point. We all have duties as citizens, right? We aspire to free market capitalism, right? Materialist advance. And that's the life I've lived as well, by the way. My parents came to this country with not a lot of money. I've lived the American dream. I've made a lot of money by building businesses. That's one side of what it means to be an American. But part of it is we also have duties to this country. And I think the more we wake that up, actually, the voting age only became 18 in 1971 in the context of the Vietnam draft. So I just
So-
think
I think
reviving
you're
those
asking-
ideas is
I
going to
think
be
you're
good for
asking
us.
a lot. So
Yeah.
let's prove your point. Nick, our camera guy, do you know the 3 branches of the
Nick
federal
is
government?
over 24, so it don't matter.
But I'm just saying, but nobody knows there are 24. Red, do you know the 3 branches?
Executive.
Well, I got a test. I got a
See what I'm
test.
saying?
I would like to see if you're willing to pass, because I believe in, just as you believe in civic engagement, I believe in changing the ideas of what political opponents look like, what they should look like, or political candidates. Are you willing to take a test with me quickly? Because I just have a couple of questions for you.
I will,
so-
absolutely.
so
And
just-
and the way this is opening up, I have a feeling I'm about to fail it, but that's good. Let's do it.
That's right. Yeah. Just for clarity, I am an independent. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican.
Cool.
I think that's important for the premise of the argument, because I know you did a lot of debating at Harvard. I also want to make it clear these are the same questions that I asked liberal Democrat Marianne Williamson. So I want to make sure that we put that out there as well, just
Fair
to kind
enough.
of set the foundation.
I'm
for the
open
test.
to being humbled. Let's do this.
Okay, great. Let's go. So you mentioned, the pride of being an American and how important it is to have pride in this country. I'm also a veteran, by the way,
Thank you.
for the United States Air Force. So when is it that you voted for the first time?
I voted in 2020.
Okay, so you're how old again?
I'm 37 years old.
So for how many years you sat around and did not get involved at all in any civic engagement? Is that my understanding?
A long time is the answer. And actually, that's what I wrote this book about. I'm not holding myself out as some sort of model. I'm actually offering myself as a self-reflection of my journey as a citizen to whom this country
Yeah.
has given much, right? As an adult, when you have kids, it changes your perspectives. I'm very honest about that. Absolutely.
Okay, no problem. So let's go deeper into the self-reflection. So you've sat around and sir, I'm being as respectful as I possibly can. Please don't take anything
And you don't
hard
even
way.
have to be. And you don't even
Yeah.
have to be. So take it
Yeah.
off and let's go.
So you've been sitting around in the country that my ancestors built for about 20 years. Your parents came over as immigrants, brought you over. You made millions, according to your resume, off of this country, and you have absolutely not been involved in civics. 1, not voting, and 2, let me just ask, because I know you mentioned earlier you don't want to sit around at the debate and talk about accomplishments. Let's make the accomplishments pretty simple. In high school, were you ever a class president or take any leadership role? Because your opponent did, Chris Christie. He was the class president. So
Yeah, I
have you
did.
ever
I mean,
taken any leadership at all on
I have-
anything, or just?
Can I just correct a couple factual things
Sure.
that are kind of important? My parents didn't bring me over to the country. I was
Okay,
born in
scratch
this
that off
country,
then.
and I'm proud
No,
of that.
I know
That's-
you were born here in Ohio.
Yeah, yeah.
Ohio.
You mentioned my
I'm
parents
saying your
brought me
parents
o-
were
Well,
immigrants.
you said-
My apologies.
That's all right. You said your parents brought you over to this country. I
Yeah,
thought I
my
would set
apologies.
that record straight.
I mean, they were immigrants, but let's
They
not
were
go down
immigrants.
the water
Oh,
hole.
no. We're not going to water hole. I just want to correct a couple facts. And then the other thing is
You were born here in Ohio.
I was
correct?
born in Cincinnati, Ohio. That's right.
Right. So
Yeah.
you've been here your entire life. So the question
That's
is,
right.
did you take any leadership role in middle school, high school, class president?
I did,
I know
yeah,
you played
yeah.
tennis. What is it? Explain it to us.
Student council. But I think that this is yes, I've held leadership roles over my life, but those don't qualify me to do what I'm doing now.
Yeah,
That's
it kind of
just-
does.
Okay,
Well, it
well,
kind of does. Well, I'm giving the test. I'm the test
Okay,
administrator.
all right, there you go.
So it kind of does, because when you go from saying I want to go to the highest office,
And I'll tell
of
you,
the land-
I've led companies as well. Is the other leader?
Right,
The
well,
main leadership
right, but-
role I've played is and I want to talk about one early part of your premise that I also want to say, to bring it to the country point. The other point, you use the word sitting around. I'm not somebody who's saying I want the next generation, my kids' generation, to have more civic duties when they graduate from high school and college than I did when I did. That being said, I wasn't sitting around. I've developed medicines, 5 of which are FDA-approved products today, one of which is a life-saving therapy in kids, 20 of whom die by the age of 3 if they're not treated, 70% of whom now live lives of a normal duration. Another one for prostate cancer. So I don't apologize
excuse
for
me,
making
sir.
contributions. But
right. Well, I don't want you to filibuster that,
No worries.
because
Just
that's
not
not
sitting-
the question that I asked. And I don't consider, as a veteran, I'm talking about service. I'm not talking about what you
Civic
did for
service,
profit. I'm not talking about what you paid people to do with
Yeah.
your
So I've
company. I'm
not
not talking
served-
about
I've not
that,
served the country
because that
in the way
means
you
nothing
have.
to me.
You do
what I'm
realize
talking,
she
what
hasn't
I
been
am
able to ask a question. She's been trying to
Go
ask
for
a
it,
question,
yeah.
and you've been talking over her.
I'm
and
all
you-
ears.
We gave you the platform to let you say.
Being a
what
little
you said.
defensive.
I'm all ears. No,
she
no,
hasn't-
I was
she
just
hasn't-
correcting
she
a couple
hasn't had a chance
facts,
to
that's
ask a
all.
question yet. Every
Go
time
ahead,
she
Ted,
tries
ask
to
the
ask a
question.
question, you've been cutting her off. Go ahead, Ted.
I'm all ears.
Right. So your question, so my question again is, you're trying to, your goal is to raise the standard, and you're saying you want people to believe in country and you want people to have civic engagement. And sir, I just find it very telling that you haven't had any civic engagement at all and haven't been at all. And when I say sit around, I don't mean you haven't done anything. I'm talking about in regards to service, because one thing about political office, the same way that you want to change how people look at politics and look at this country, I want to change how people look at politicians. And when I see that someone hasn't did anything at all to be of service to mankind, to take a leadership role. It's not good enough to just be on city student council. Were you a leader? All of that applies. Have you been able to get anybody in the room at any time, from a high school gymnasium to Ohio, Republican leadership there to now? Have you been able to get anybody in a room to believe in this vision? I don't agree with a lot of your vision statement, but I do know you've been going around having these discussions and getting everybody emotionally worked up to talk about vision and debate. But I want to get to the practical. You're trying to go from preschool to president of the United States. You're skipping over city council, county council, mayor, governor. You want to go straight to the top. So my question is this a PR? Is this for the PR, the perception of reality? Or can you point to any leadership where you've been able to get people to believe in what you're talking about that they're not paid to do on any of these vision statements that you have? If not, then to me, it's a moot point, because you're holding a standard that you haven't met yourself.
So if you're only going to count government service, you're absolutely
No, not government
right.
service.
Okay.
Student council in the 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th. Were you a leader? Did you do anything to rally anybody? Did you fight for better lunch? I did in the 6th grade with Miss Harris.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about government. I can go all the way back from the 5th grade every year, sir, because people who are in service to this country, if you're going to go around saying you want people to believe in this country that I signed up to die for, then I want to make sure that you're holding that same standard. So not government, not political. Let's not get it confused. I'm saying, have you did anything of service that we can point to say he is a good leader, like Chris? And I'm not even a fan of Chris Christie, but he was the student council president in high school. So have you done anything of service besides yourself that has not benefited yourself? It's just a simple question.
So the acts of service that I have performed are small, so small that I don't even want to talk about them to boast. But yes, have I volunteered for this country? Yes, I have. I've always been interested in
let's talk
healthcare.
about it. It's okay to talk about the small things.
These are small things, right? But thank you.
Let's just mention it.
Bethesda North Hospital.
So it's really a no?
No, it's not a no. It's just something I don't like boasting about. I
Well,
volunteer.
we're not boasting. It's an
not
interview.
boasting.
You're
There we go.
boasting on your vision and everything else.
I think
you
one of the
boasted
things-
on the millions of dollars that you made. So let's just throw it out. So in
I
6th
actually
grade, I'll give
didn't.
you an example. I'll help you out. In 6th grade, Miss
I'll
Harris,
tell you-
Miss Harris was let me give you an example, because maybe you're confused. In the 6th grade, Miss Harris was snatching papers from everybody in the classroom. So me as a 10-year-old, I went to the principal and said, I'm tired of Miss Harris snatching papers, and I'll organize the students around getting Miss Harris to stop snatching papers. Now, there was a consequence for that. I got suspended for 5 days for talking back, and I got in trouble. I got a spanking, and I was on punishment for months and months. But that is a simple way of organizing people. So I want you to kind of boast about it the way you did the millions of dollars and said what you did with the pharmaceutical companies. What leadership can you point to that you've been able to rally anybody around anything that is of service that you did not pay anybody to do? I think that's important for the next president of the United States.
Sure. So I've always been drawn to healthcare. That's why I ended up founding companies in that space. When I was in high school, part of what drew me into it was that I was a volunteer at a local hospital. I actually became the leader of that group of volunteers that actually discharged women who had recently given birth. That was it. Nothing big to it.
Did you do anything we can point to stand out?
But I want to say something about that, because I say that in the book. If I'm being really honest, why did I do that in high school? A part of the motivation, I'll be just brutally honest with you, was that's actually what allows you to get into a good college when you graduate. Is you want to check the box of community service.
So it was about you.
So there was
it was about self.
So there's that, and I'm admitting that in a way that very few other people do. But I got to be honest about it. That was a big part of why I did it.
Yeah, it was about self, and I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to give it back to the guys. I'm going to be honest about it with you.
Yep.
Leadership is not about self.
I agree with you on that.
What I just heard is that everything is about you. And to be honest with you, this is just a PR campaign, sir. To be honest with you, and I think you're trying to go further to the right because you want the Republicans to accept you as a man of color. And I think the only way you think you can do that is to be so extreme.
I appreciate your opinion
with your positions, and I think you need to do a little bit more work in service. I'll give it back to you guys.
Let
You failed the test, by the
because
way.
she did ask me a question, and then you guys said you wanted to hear a response, but I think I heard an expression of opinion. So just I want to make sure you're all done before I respond to it.
Go ahead.
No,
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to say that even then, I would still want you to point out, even at the
Yeah.
hospital, something that you did that made you stand out on when actually taking a leadership role. But you already answered it. You said you did it because it was a motivation to get in college.
Exactly.
Which means
and
it was
I'm being
about
very
you.
honest about that. But
Everything has been about you. So as
Let me-
a veteran,
let me
as
tell
a
you
veteran,
something. I appreciate
it's very
this.
hard for me to follow leaders that make everything about them. So you might want to work on that because it's a lot of veterans and Republicans. So you might want to work on that talking point and maybe do some volunteering while you're on the campaign trail. I'm going to give it back to Charlamagne and Envy.
Yeah. Once I want to be respectful. Want to make sure you got everything you wanted to on the table before I
But
before
no,
I
I got
respond to
plenty.
that.
If this was just
Go
us,
ahead,
it would be a lot more.
You
on the
guys tell
table.
me. I'm the guest on
Go
your
ahead,
show.
go
You
ahead,
tell me
go
when
ahead.
I'm good to speak.
Go ahead, sir.
Go ahead.
You sure? You sure about that? If we're good.
Yeah, we're sure.
So I think there's a different worldview that we have. And I think the worldview is how one actually makes contributions in a country. I do not believe that there's a separate category of just if you're serving the country and then if you're acting in self-interest, that that's somehow sinful or wrong. I reject that vision. To the contrary, I think capitalism is the best system known to man to lift people up from poverty. I deeply respect and I thank you for your service to this country. I'm grateful for it. I haven't served the country in the way that you have. But I think that the way you get ahead in capitalism, how did I develop a multi-billion-dollar biotech company? It was
lot of
by
people say
developing
capitalism
medicines that
causes
save
poverty,
people's
though.
lives.
A lot of
What's
people
that?
say capitalism causes poverty.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
Okay.
I disagree with that. I think that capitalism demands that you provide something to someone that helps them more than you're actually charging them for it. That's the only way.
That's
the
a
tried and
business
true
model,
way for you
sir.
get-
That's
It
not
is a business
service.
model. It's not. I'm not
That's
saying
not
it's
service.
I'm saying it's
But
having
see,
an impact on
An
society.
elected official is service. That's the disconnect.
That's right. So
that you're
now,
missing that they didn't
I'm
teach you.
moving on to there are phases of our lives where we do different things.
Well,
I've
you're
been-
moving straight all the way up to President of the United States.
You know, I don't
Let's
view it as a
start first.
hierarchy. I don't view it as a hierarchy. I don't believe in hierarchies. The hierarchy is the way the
that's the pro-
bureaucracy works. I don't believe in so we have a
I
difference in
know
opinion.
you also don't believe in service, and that's where we're having a disconnect.
Well, I disagree with you on that.
You know,
I just disagree with you on that.
I do think it's whack that you're proposing to revoke voting rights for 18 to 24-year-olds unless they meet certain qualifications, but you never exercised your rights.
Well,
For so long.
most young people don't. Is the whole point.
Well,
So,
that's not
Charlamagne, let me
true.
ask you a question.
The
Do you
largest
think the most
the largest voter turnouts have been over the last couple elections, last few elections?
they
actually.
still voted at a very low rate? But let me ask you a question. What do you think about high school students being required to pass the civics test? What's your perspective on that?
The one that you proposed?
The one that every immigrant has to pass in order to enter the country. If every high school student has to pass that before they graduate, what's your take on that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Okay, good. Now let me tell you something about the law as it exists today. Men in this country, not women, but men are required by law to register with the Selective Service, age 18 to 25. That's the draft. We don't have a draft, but men have to register. If you don't, they put you in prison. At least they can. It's a criminal offense if you don't. My view is I would decriminalize that. I don't like the government telling you what you can and cannot do. That's not the American way. But if you want to enjoy the civic privilege of voting, then I think it is perfectly legitimate to say you have to at least know something about the country or have served that country, one or the other. Absolutely. Now, I think that what do we actually care about, right? What do we? I mean, we can do the personal attack
voting
thing.
is
we care
is
about the
not personal
country.
attack,
We
sir.
care about
Voting
the
is the
country.
cornerstone of democracy, though.
Voting is the cornerstone of
didn't
democracy.
exercise.
I have
Well,
not.
sir,
Yeah,
excuse
that's
me.
right. And you know, here's the thing. Here's the thing that's
Respectfully,
different
sir,
is, yep,
sir, excuse me, because this is important. We have to pause it. This is not a personal attack.
that's okay.
This is you, and I know that as a Republican, you are certainly not soft. So this is not a personal attack.
Yeah,
this
I'm
is
okay with
asking
attacks,
about.
too.
This is about asking about your background and how it correlates, how it's relevant to saying you're going to serve this country because. President is actually
So I have been an
serving
open book
country.
in the last
No,
3 years.
Yeah, I know, and I'm
Absolutely.
going page by page.
And
but
I'm
it's not
saying
an
that I
attack.
have not-
I'm gonna let you finish.
Yep.
But I want to be clear. It's not an attack.
Okay.
Because you've been an open book, but that doesn't
Totally.
mean I have to like what's on the page.
That's fair
But
enough.
it's not an attack. I'm just reading the book.
Yep.
And so when I hear somebody say you need to get to either pass this test or do some type of service to the country, and I spend hours looking. You were in the Phi Beta Kappa Did you have a leadership role in college, the honor roll? When somebody sets service as the standard and they've done no service except to themselves, that's a fair question. It's a question, and you just
So I've been on the. I mean, look, I was on I was on high school student council. Yes, absolutely.
Were you a leader? Were you a leader?
I was a vice president of my high school student council. Absolutely, I was the president of the National Honor Society. I can go down the list. It's just that
that's
these
what
are
I was asking you to do. Go down the list. But
so I was a president of the National Honor Society. I was the vice president of my student council. I was a lead amongst the volunteers at the hospital where I served growing up. I was actually a leader in volunteer research over the summers. From my senior year,
all of that, but you already admitted all of that was to get into college.
Not all of it, but I am admitting it. I think that
I know that's self-service, though. I just do you understand the difference between self-service and service?
I think the reality is, and I think we just all have to be more honest. When many high school students are serving today, not all of them, but I think let's smoke it out. I don't like that structure where we actually mix service with self-interest.
And I don't like the structure of somebody saying somebody need to give service as a veteran. I don't like the structure of somebody going to the highest office of the land and have not served anybody at any time unless it was self-serving. So this is where we just have two different ideologies. And I know your goal was to come here and get into.
Here's my perspective.
That's why we got different perspectives.
Remember, two guys, you got to leave in 5 minutes. I know.
I'll let them wrap up.
Let me just say one thing: here's my vision of the run for presidency, and this is why I say I'm an open book. Is my job is to make sure people in this country know who I am and what I stand for. And I think that very few politicians on either party actually get that job done. So what I say is I'm an open book about who I am and what I stand for. Whether the people of this country want to vote for me, that's their question, not mine. That's their job to determine, not mine. And you're free not to vote for me. I expect you won't, and that's okay. But I'm doing my job in the 3 books I've written over the last year, in the conversation I'm having with you guys, being far more honest than any politician that I know in the last 10 years in this country. And I think when I say we want to fix corruption, you don't know what the first step is? The first step is actually people being honest. So you guys know me. You know what I stand for. I haven't hit back on that. Whether the people in this country want to vote for it, that's their choice.
Do you want to unite the country?
I do want to unite the country.
So why is one of your marquee campaign proposals making sure black people can no longer benefit from affirmative action?
See, here's the thing. It's actually been a disastrous experiment over the last 60 years. I've seen the impact that it's had. Unlike a lot of other executives, I've had senior executives in my company who happen to be black, senior executives in my campaign who happen to be black. I actually went to a majority or close to majority black school 1st through 8th grade. There isn't a single one of those black kids or black colleagues that could not have achieved everything I have in my life. I firmly believe that to be true. And I have seen the unfair discrimination behind closed doors, the things that people will say behind closed doors, about somebody who would have had that position anyway, but was unfairly tarred with the taint of saying they got it because of a race-based quota system. I think that's unjust to everyone across the board. And I think that the right way to do this is actually ensure equality of opportunity, educational access at an early age, which, by the way, we don't have in this country, starting at an actual young age. How about doing that in a way that's agnostic to race? That way we prevent seeing one another on the basis of a color of our skin, but we actually solve the real inequalities that we have when it starts with inequality of opportunity, starting with education. So my view is, I think my approach is actually going to be more successful in lifting up more black Americans than have been the Lyndon Johnson approach of actually using race-based quota systems.
So if the Supreme Court does rule on affirmative action and they do ban it, who do you feel it benefits versus who it hurts?
I think that it helps everyone if they end race-based affirmative action in college admissions. I think it will literally help everyone in different ways because it restores merit in the United States. Are we perfect in ensuring equality of opportunity? No, we're not. The fact that kids are trapped by the zip code in which they're born, determining where they go to school, is a problem, which is why I favor universal school choice in this country, which has actually done more to help black Americans than has any affirmative action program.
What's your thoughts on people saying that you got Don Lemon fired?
I think that the New York Times reported that. I had an open debate with Don Lemon. What CNN wanted to do with that is their choice. My view is, though, we need to start saying in public the things that people are otherwise saying in private. There's a gap right now in the country. Let's admit it. Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter.
You got to be careful with that because a lot of people in your party are going to start saying nigga out loud.
I don't think so, actually. And I would certainly hope not. I would condemn it if they do. I would condemn it if anybody does. All right. But what I think is we need to close the gap between what people say in private and what they say in public. That allows us to air our differences, and then we actually find unity that way. That's actually what I think unites the country, not creating this culture of hush hush, right? Say one thing in public and a different thing in private. And I do reject Don Lemon's premise. What did he tell me on set? He said, you can disagree with me when you have black skin and you've lived in this country, whatever ethnicity you are. Explain it
sir,
to me. I just reject
did
that.
Not,
I think we should.
Sir, let's just use a real example of just what everybody said. You said, people can have difference of opinion. They can have, you want to unite people. I gave you a difference of opinion as a veteran, and you came back and said that I was personally attacking you, and that is a way of gaslighting and basically, trying to set the idea that I was against you when I just had. That's the statement you made, and what I'm saying is, instead of us just having the debate, because see, I didn't talk about colors, which you probably expected when you came in here.
I did not.
I didn't. Well, that's fine. I didn't talk about color. I didn't get all emotional about your vision, because I really wanted to just talk about what you've done in service, because you yourself has raised service as the number one thing that what people need to do in order to participate in the country that my ancestors built. And you said that I personally attacked you. So just to give you some advice, if you're going to say, hey, let's have difference of opinion, let's be able to discuss.
I loved everything you did. I loved the whole thing.
That because I had a question that it was a personal attack, because
it was. I don't think a question. I think this is great, because you know what I said? What's the job?
Did you say personal attack?
What's the
I just
job?
want to make sure I heard correctly.
Everybody needs to know who a candidate is and what they stand for. That's the candidate's job. Whether you vote for them or not, that's your choice.
Did you say I personally attacked you, or did I hear it wrong? I just want to make sure.
I did not say you personally attacked me. No, I said we have actual good. I wanted to know whether or not we were actually able to. You said sit around for 20 years. I said I didn't sit around for 20 years, but that's okay. I think that, you know what? If somebody's running for U.S. president, I want to say this.
Well, you
can't handle the heat. You stay out of the kitchen. So we'll come in.
We can keep
and we'll
going
handle
with the
heat.
personal attacks. You did say personal attacks, though. So let's be honest. Remember, that's your number one thing, being honest.
And I know you.
I agree with you.
I know you have to go, but I do disagree on what you said about affirmative action, because I feel like without that legislation, I don't think black people stand a chance. We had to create the legislation to even have a chance. And I don't know why you have faith that without that legislation, things will be fair or on equal footing for black people.
I think that most people who benefit from affirmative action are the immigrants who came after Kennedy's immigration reform in the 60s. They are not descendants of slaves. They are people who came as immigrants like my parents did. Mm-hmm. And so I just think it is a broken system to say that you look like someone to whom a bad thing once happened, and you're going to be favored over someone who looks like someone who once did a bad thing.
You think your parents would have gotten the same shot without that legislation?
I mean, so it turns out that Asian Americans, Indian Americans don't benefit from. You want to take away something
that benefited your parents, which directly benefited you.
See, here's what I'm saying is whether or not it's in our past, the question is, how do we actually move forward as one nation? And I do not believe it is with race-based quotas. I believe it is economically empowering all Americans.
I think that legislation was put here to protect people that look like me, people that look like you, and I think you're ridiculous to want to get rid of.
Here's what I would say is Lyndon Johnson's Great Society that this was part of, right? So affirmative action was part of it. There was a broader set of policies designed to help black Americans, I think have been disastrous for black Americans and all Americans.
Well, sir, it wasn't disastrous for you. And what Charlamagne is saying is your parents benefited from it.
They did not. I mean, as a point of fact, that's false. Indian Americans do not benefit from affirmative action.
No, that's not as a point of fact. No, that's not as a point of fact. Because without the liberties that black folks have fought for, which has basically immigrants have been able to prosper in this country because of that. But we're not going to go there. Let's just say they benefited from being able to have the freedoms that black people fought for. That's the bottom line. And in turn, it benefited you. And then your answer a moment ago was, well, let's not talk about stuff from our past. See, once it benefited you, you were able, you moved on.
I want to be honest with you. Guys want to get real. Let's get real. My parents were.
That's why the heart of a service. No, sir. Because the black people hadn't fought.
Yeah, we got to get real. My grandparents lived. They lived in a colonial society. Britain colonized where my grandparents lived as well. But I think that I don't do well by seeing myself as a victim of the white man because actually Great Britain happened to have colonized where my grandparents were actually colonized.
I think you were
That's moving the goalpost.
I think you were victorious.
I don't benefited your parents when they got here.
That's right.
What benefited all of us is the fact that we have a free country. Where anybody is free to achieve what they want. I don't know they came to this country with not a lot of money. What benefited them was hard work and dedication. My dad faced layoffs when he was growing up at GE. Right. He went to law school at night to be able to keep his job. What did that teach me?
Affirmative action benefited him?
I don't think affirmative action benefited him. Absolutely not. I think hard work and dedication benefited him. And that's part of what I want to share with all Americans. I want to make this the country where no matter who you are and what your skin color is, You get ahead with your own hard work and commitment and dedication. That you get ahead not on the color of your
wish it
skin,
was
but the
that
content of your character.
He has to go, guys.
And that's what I want for America.
One more thing. You told a voter that you were open to ending foreign aid to Israel. Then it was reported that it was a misunderstanding. What happened with that?
Yeah, it was. That was a false reporting, actually. So I think.
You never said that.
No, I did not. I said that I was open to actually a broad strategy of disengagement from the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
My general view is we fought a lot of pointless wars for a very long time. Ukraine's the pointless war of the moment. And I think that the United States needs to disengage from parts of the world if it does not advance American interests. China's the top threat that we face, and we actually need to prioritize that in our foreign policy.
All right. Well, we appreciate you for joining us.
I appreciate you guys having me.
How do I say?
Do
I
you
don't want
mean
to say your
that?
name right.
Huh?
Do you mean that?
I do mean that, actually, because we don't do this enough, right?
Yeah.
So I do mean that. And I will come back if you guys will have me when I'm in New York City.
absolutely.
Of course.
Because to your point, the Republican debates will be way worse. By the way.
Oh, yeah.
It's not
Chris
real. I mean,
Christie.
we got to get real with
I
each
can
other.
definitely tell you, Chris is going to ask about your background, so you might want to start volunteering on your free time.
Oh, I don't believe in virtue signaling. I am who I am. I'm an open book. We're all
Yeah.
imperfect human beings. We're an imperfect country. We aspire to be the best version of
Yeah,
ourselves.
that's not virtual signaling, though, sir. That's just a question, and you need to aspire to do something other than something that benefits yourself. That's all. If you want to say you're going to serve the country, the president is a service role. It's not running a business. So
Here's the positive
service
I'll
is
give you. I
important.
think your message is powerful for young Americans across this country to hear, and that's
No,
what
my
I'm going to
message
take.
is right for
That's
you.
actually what I'm going to
Somebody
take from
that
this.
said- No, my message is for you because you're saying that people need to reach a certain level of service to be able to vote in the country that my ancestors fought and died for. So my message is not for you. See, I don't do visionary messages. I do direct, straight shot. The host of Straight Shot, No Chaser. My message for you is if you're going to require people to be a certain age to vote, you should have been able to meet that. My message for you is if you're going to say that if you can't do that, if you can't pass the test, then you need to be able to provide service to your country. You should have been able
My
to provide
message
service
to you
your
is if
country.
you disagree with me, you don't have to vote for me, but I respect your view, and we need to actually have a country where we need to have this debate in a
absolutely
way,
not
in a
voting
way
for
that
you. I
doesn't
just did an
personalize it.
interview. That's all. I just wanted to point out the discrepancies on your platform versus what you've actually done because
What
that
do
does
I want
matter.
for the country is I grew up in this country, and I want to actually
I want this for
lead
you,
the next
though.
generation
I want
to be
this
proud.
for you.
Well, I
See,
appreciate,
but I want it for
I
you.
appreciate you wishing
want
that
this
for
for
me.
you.
And
Yeah, I want it for
I'm
you.
in this because I actually want to give back to a country that, yes, has allowed me to succeed in it. And I want to
And
make
I-
sure that the
and I
next
want you
generation
to
of
be a
Americans
leader.
lives that same dream. Thank you very
And
much.
as a veteran, I
appreciate
want you to be a leader and I want you to serve this country before you tell everybody else they got to serve it. That's all. We just
All
have a
right.
difference of opinion.
I appreciate your opinion. Thank you.
Is Vivek?
Thank you.
Did I say that right?
You wanna
It's
tell
Vivek.
Tell them where to
Vivek
donate to your campaign.
Ramaswamy.
if you want to?
Yeah, it's Vivek Ramaswamy. You visit Vivek2024.com. You'll learn more about the campaign, and if the ideas speak to you, then come on and sign up.
All right. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.
Appreciate it, guys.
Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.